103, oxy-fuel equipment chapter. Personal protective equipment, authorized oxy-fuel equipment, general instruction, repair, alteration, equipment condition, ventilation, fire, explosive with potential, welding, gas, description, oxygen, liquid oxygen, acetylene, propane, cylinder, construction, oxygen, liquid oxygen, acetylene, exposure, excessive heat, destroying cylinders, working in with the cylinder, the transportation cylinders, ebony cylinder, leaking cylinder, the changing cylinder, hot metal percussion, regulators, proper regulator, single two-stage regulator, connection, adaptive connection, regulators protecting regulators and cylinder valves, opening cylinder valves, oxygen cylinder valve, settling cylinder valve, propane cylinder valve, closing valve, clog valve, torch valve, operation, hose, description, hose connection, torches, handle, flashback, arrestor, youth, the line, ends, pressure gauge, the cutting, welding, attachment of the tip, the torch, precaution, the equipment setup, the cylinder, youth, the pressure regulator, leak test, the ignition extinguishing torch, ignition, oxyacetylene torch, extinguishing, oxyacetylene torch, ignition, oxypropane torch, extinguishing, oxypropane torch, tips, charts, and drain the system. Personal protective equipment, oxy-fuel cutting, heating, personal protective equipment, a hard hat with a hard heating, hard hat protection, dual eye protection with 12 with a wraparound face with a goggle with a safety goggles, vinyl grade, shaded 5 with a safety goggles, shoe with the alternate leather, welding glove with a welding jacket, the welding sleeve with leather, leggings, approved with a safety toe with the toe, boots, and flame-resistant clothing, so for the respiratory policy for the respirator equipment. 1032, authorized use of the oxy-fuel equipment. Not only authorized employee with a permit with the oxy-fuel equipment, the welding, cutting, and heating will be only under the direct supervision qualified employee comply with the manufacturer instruction qualification intentionally with qualified with the oxy-fuel equipment. Employee that must be properly trained with the use of the such equipment, completion of the exam of the skill, the assessment, the perform of the manager for the track welding, with the welding instructor. Employees must re-qualify every 3 years with a computer-based training with a demonstrator of the skills of their welding management. Employee with a general instruction and repair with the alteration. Do not make repairs and alterations cylinder valve with the torch for the defect of the regulator gauge for the torch for the other equipment. It must not be used with a demonstrator term with a designated point with a repair with a hose should be indicated with a leak of the burns, warm plate with the evidence of the damage of flashback with the other defect with the repair. A plate with a hose repair can be made with the field with approved with the clamping fair with the button not more than 2 splice with the are allowed with the length of the hose with the U with the tie wire with the hose with the clamp with the repair with the hose prohibited the splices may be removed prior to the initial use of the next day with the shift of the hose must be replaced with the hose the damage beyond with the repair with the must be replaced. 1332, the equipment condition, inspect all equipment before you verify with the free of the defect of the proper work condition, ventilation, work on the well ventilated air exposure to lead, zinc, and other welding fumes required with improve the respirator of the spray with the dust of respirators are not suitable, the must not be used, the fire and explosive potential welding, cutting and heating the piston heads of the hollow and casting containers for the drum and the barrel of the tank is prohibited, welding gas in the description, oxygen. Oxygen is colorless with tasteless, odorless gas, slightly heavier than air, is not flammable. The will support combustion with the other elements. The presence of the pure with the oxygen drastically increase with the speed with the force of the burning takes place. With the oxygen is required with the support of the burning problem combined with the fuel gas to produce the desired operating flame. Always refer to the oxygen, never as air. The combustible shall keep the away with the oxygen inside. Include the cylinder gauge of the regulator with the other hose operator. The oxygen should never be used in an air tool. The oxygen must not be used with the compressed air with the source of the pressure for the dust clove. Do not allow air. Allow oil with the grease to come in contact with the oxygen. Oil agree with the presence of the oxygen. Simultaneously ignite with the burn violently and explode with the oxygen cylinders. Apparatus should not be the hand with the oil hands. Oil gloves do not allow oil agree with the touch regulators valve with the connections. Liquid oxygen. Liquid oxygen is pale blue with extremely cold, although non-flammable oxygen is stronger than oxygen. With liquid oxygen, cryogenic liquids are liquids gases that normally boiling point below 238 degrees negative 238 degrees Fahrenheit. Liquid oxygen has a boiling point to negative 297.3 degrees Fahrenheit. Because of the temperature difference between the product with the supporting environment is substantial, even if the winter will keep liquid oxygen insulated with the surrounding heat. The essential product is also requires special equipment for the handling storage. Oxygen is often stored with the liquid, although it is used primarily as a gas. Acetylene is used with the colors flammable gas composed with the carbon and hydrogen manufactured with the reaction with the water and calcium carbide with the acetylene. Use the oxygen produce the highest flame temperature with any of the fuel gas with approximately 6,300 degrees Fahrenheit. Because the acetylene is stored with the liquid cylinder will only work with the properties with the tank with the upright position. Use the storing with the tank with any other position extremely dangerous. Although acetylene is stable under low pressure, compressed above 15 psi becomes unstable. Avoid exposed the filled cylinders, heat furnaces, radiators, open fire, sparks from torch. Avoid striking when the cylinder against for the object with the creating spark with avoid shocking when the transporting cylinders. Do not drag or roll with the slide them over the rails, sides. Acetylene must be drawn off of the volumes greater than 1/7 of the cylinder rated capacity. If higher volumes are needed, use the manifold system in sufficient size. Propane. Propane is hydrocarbon, with sometimes referred to as liquefied petroleum gas, liquefied petroleum, or LP gas or LPG, with a non-toxic colorless, virtually odorless, heavier than air. Propane is produced in both natural gas processed and crude oil refining in roughly equal amounts. With natural gas, strongly identified odor with added, so the gas can be readily detected. If liquid propane leaks or the vapor out of the dissipates into the air, cylinder sticker located near the top of the cylinder identified with the cylinder contents, non-flammable marker. The cylinder construction oxygen, see figure 103. Typical oxygen cylinder is made with steel that has a capacity of 220 cubic feet with a pressure of about 22,250 psi attached with equipment that consists of the ion outlet valve, the removable metal cap with the protection valve, with low melting. Point safety fuse plug with a cylinder with a wrapper key with a single plate with a high grade steel with a no seam with a heat treat, the maximum strength with a beacon with a high pressure for the oxygen cylinder with the undergo extent for the testing prior with the release of the work must be periodically retested thereafter. Removable metal cap, tip top and bronze valve with a safety fuse with a plug disc and pressure steel neck ring with an 8.5 inch diameter, minimum wall thickness and 25 to 16,000 with an inch. Cylinder construction liquid oxygen figure 103. C with liquid steel with less bulk with less containment with the equivalent capacity. The high pressure gas is stored with a sclerogenic tank constructed within principle the thermal valve with the inner vessel with the surrounding the outer vessel of the vessel with the annular space with the containment with the insulation medium from which the air has been removed. The space prevents the heat from coming into contact with liquid oxygen stored with the inner vessel with the temperature of the liquid oxygen is approximately near 300 degrees Fahrenheit. Remain the liquid stay with the cover the U the valve open and open the U the valve draw the liquid oxygen through the coil which allow the liquid to expand chain with the gas. Liquid oxygen cylinder builds up the pressure within sight. Lateral cylinders automatically start with the relief of the pressure bleed off of the cylinder pressure reach of 250 psi. Cylinder's highest psi regulator reading should be up for the care must be taken with a drop of liquid oxygen cylinder. Liquid oxygen cylinders must remain upright with a vertical position. In the event liquid oxygen is dropped, tripped over the breathe the following. Slowly raise the cylinder in vertical position. Open the vent, release any of the excess of the pressure. Leave the valve with the open position. Remove the liquid product of the vessel as soon as properly inspect with the cylinder before returning it to service. Prior to applying the oxygen regulator with the liquid oxygen cylinder, slightly open the use valve with the clear of the valve stem and then close the lead position. Oxygen regulator use valve tighten. Notice that the use valve stem is fairly long. It must be supported with a glove handle. The valve must be open slowly for you've never open liquid valve. Cylinder construction, acetylene with a degree with the side with the open side with the cylinder, acetylene similar to with the porous material with the ballast for the wood, for the charcoal, with the corn pith or Portland cement, acetylene with the core flame liquid with the add with the cylinder with the bow with the 40% of the porcelain porous material with attached with the porous material with the axe, large spout with absorb with the acetylene, acetone with absorb with the acetylene with the profit the volume with the acetone and then increase with the absorb with the acetylene. Acetylene becomes being a gas to with the volume of the fuel gas cylinder identified flammable sticker attached near the top of the cylinder. Removable cap steel valve safety plugs 12 inch diameter 40.5 inches monolithic filler balsa wood for resistant material safety fuse plug. Exposure to excessive heat. Do not allow cylinders to be exposed with spark, hot slag, open flame, or other source of excessive heat. Storing cylinders. When storing oxygen or fuel gas cylinders, handle cylinders with extreme caution and avoid dropping the damage value. With separate oxygen cylinders with the fuel gas cylinder, maintain minimum distance to 20 feet. Place a barrier non-combustible material at least 5 feet high with a fire resistant rating of at least 30 minutes between the oxygen fuel gas cylinder. Store oxygen fuel gas cylinder upright position. Improve the racks for the properly secured. To keep the valves ends up with the cylinder must be secured with the web with the beings transported placed within storage. Certain cylinders cooled well ventilated buildings away from the elevator shaft of the passageway when possible. Place them near the exit for the removal. In case the fire stored cylinders open with the cylinder can be protected against freezing in the direct sunlight. No smoking. Use the match to open flame lights if the torches of the building where cylinders are stored. No smoking. Open the flame. The stands must be posted on a visible slide. When not used, outlets should be kept them tightly closed. Even though cylinders are considered empty, valve caps must be kept in place. Oxygen fuel gas connections applying with it must be kept free with the oil gas. If it do not handle cylinder oil. Handle the glove to keep the cylinders away from the combustible material, oil painting, chain, the other flammable materials. Working with cylinders. When working with the cylinders, do not place cylinders where they become an electric part of the electrical current. Or placing cylinders near wires, electrical welding circuits. Do not strike with the arc of the tap of the electrode against the cylinder. Oxygen fuel gas cylinders might be used with the upright position. Do not throw or drop the otherwise roughly handled cylinders. Do not leave cylinders standing upright unless they are secured with a suitable support with a chain and other holder. In failure to compartments of work truck other properly ventilated outside block cylinders lying on the ground to prevent rolling. Cylinders may be lifted with the crane derrick or the hoist only by a company approved lifting device if used. With employees should have been instructed on use. No, use an electrical magnet and use of an electrical magnet to lift cylinders is prohibited. Alright, transportation cylinders. Transporting gas cylinder, remove the regulators applied with the chain cap before transporting oxygen fuel gas cylinders on the left of the valves covered by the Department of Transportation. Proof of safety cap of the device for the design for the purpose of the proof of safety cap of the device for the protect the cylinder valve allowed with the regulator remain attached with the cylinder valve with carrying fuel gas cylinders have recessed valve with the protected, therefore do not require safety cap hose. May be the drain with the gas regulator with adjust with the screw with the turn counterclock with the closed regulator diaphragm cap needs to be not applied to complete with a single series of the welding operation with the company property for the transporting oxygen fuel cylinders and tool cars and collapse compartments ensure proper ventilation is provided. Empty cylinder. The cylinders are empty closed within cylinder valve before the disconnecting the hose valves must be remain closed when the cylinders are not in use. The apply steering cap of the empty cylinders. Remove the bottom half of the tank with the provided on red on fuel gases with the green on oxygen cylinder and separate empty of the cylinders and the fuel cylinder properly extreme the empty cylinders supply point. A leaking cylinder. When leaking cylinder is discovered, move it to the open area away from the possible shovel of the ignition until the cylinder is empty. Make the cylinder indicating the defect with the shovel. The supplier can take corrective action. Changing cylinder before regulator is removed with the cylinder valve. The cylinder must be closed with the gas release with the regulator. Drain both hose to one side at the time and remove any possible gas mixture. Turn pressure adjusting screw counterclockwise to ensure the non-pressure regulator diaphragm. Hot metal precautions. When cutting, improve the spark shield to prevent sparks. Hot metal several section of the containing cylinder hose, the cables, other flammable material. Do not lay object material to be heated, cut, or weld across the cylinder on concrete. Regulators, proper regulators. Do not use the regulator which with a gas not intended for that regulator. Use the oxygen fuel with gas regulator. Cylinder station must have a shut-off valve with control with the pressure producing regulator obtained with the recommended test pressure. Regulators must have the operable gas gauges. Use the regulators without gauges as prohibited. Use oxygen fuel gas cylinder with the station must be shut off with the other back and be controlled with the pressure producing regulator to obtain with the recommended test pressure. Regulators must have the operable gauges. Use regulators without gauges is prohibited. Single stage regulators. Single two-stage regulators born reducing station relieve the cylinder pressure for the gas to the working pressure of the one step with a single-stage regulator. Small adjustment with the required with the maintain specific operating pressure of the cylinder. Pressure decrease with the two-stage regulator has two reducing station from the first station usually present the 200 psi not adjustable with the operating with the flow with the second reducing stage. Operator will need to make an adjustment, make the operation pressure till the cylinder pressure drops below 200 psi, but there is no safety advantage between the single stage and the two-stage regulator mechanism of the nozzle from which the high pressure gases of the valve see with the closed off the nozzle with the balancing spring, some type of the reef valve with the inlet filter, the screw with the dust and dirt. Pressure gauges are provided to control the pressure from the cylinder pipeline and the working pressure C1035. Connections. Adapter do not force connection thread does not run easily. Usually wrong size regulator is applied using the standard adapter between cylinder regulator is required and T or Y type connections are prohibited. Connection regulators. Between connection regulators, the cylinder welders must open with the cylinder valve slightly to blow out with any form material. The valve should be open approximately 1/4 turn when closed immediately. Do not open the fuel gas valve with neither other welding working near sparks of flame and other possible ignition. Protecting regulators. Protect regulators when not used by closing cylinder valve with draining hose at the torch, releasing pressure on the diaphragm. Front of gas mixture with accumulating with the hose. Either the hose is being relieved of the pressure by closing the valve with the other pressure of the other hose, preventing flashback, which can damage the torch or hose pressure regulator. Cylinder valves. Opening cylinder valves. Pressure adjusting screw must be fully released before attaching regulators. Cylinder regulators are already attached to the cylinder with the relief of the pressure for the adjusting screw before opening the cylinder valve. With opening the cylinder valve, stand at one side with the gauge face with the front with the regulator with a special wrench with the required must be left in position on the valve stand with the cylinder in use, and the vent of fuel gas must be quickly turned off with the emergency. The return of the cylinder venter over the oxygen valve can be opened by hand. Do not use the hammer, wrench, or opening with the oxygen cylinder valve. Oxygen cylinder valve. Oxygen cylinder valve with a double seal. Seal with the design to be with a fully open and fully closed position valve that may be leaked with a partially open and place hand around the oxygen cylinder knob on the top of the initially opening valve. Slowly open oxygen cylinder valve with a high pressure gauge indicate with the full pressure of the fully open valve. The settling cylinder valve. Settling cylinder valves are single seat design. Do not operate the settling cylinder valve more than 1.5 turns. This will allow the cylinder valve to quickly shut off in case of emergency. Leave the T-wrench settling cylinder valve stem in the case of emergency. Rather, do not play with the T's other end recessed on top of the cylinder with the damage of the safety plug will interfere with the quickly closing the valve. Propane cylinder valve. Propane cylinder valve with a double seat is designed to be with a fully open and fully closed position valve. May be only partially open. Slowly open the propane cylinder valve until the high pressure gauge indicates the full pressure, then open the valve. Closing the valve. The valve cylinder and stations on pipe. The manifold system must be closed when not in use. The work is stopped or completed when the operator leaves the equipment. The valve must be operated with the relief of the pressure of the regulator hose. Clog valves. Ice or snow clog fuel glass cylinder valves use warm, medium hot water within. Thaw them. Do not use boiling water since it may loosen fusible plugs. Not any type of valve fuel gas cylinder valves. Torch valve operation. Ensure that the torch valves are open, changing the adjusting pressure regulators gauge to indicate actual operating pressure if it doesn't exceed pressures authorized in welding cutting. Hoses. Hose description. The hoses are provided with a connection allowed with the proper attachment of the regulator. Torch of the fuel gas hosing fitting left-hand threads identified with the notches. Oxygen hose of the right-hand threads. Why, when using oxygen fuel equipment, the only equipment designed with the bias being used, but not use the oxygen fuel gas, the hoses must be properly destroyed with the damage to prevent the damage. Oxygen fuel gas must be inspected prior to inspect each of the hoses with the leak of the other defect with the must be repaired with the plate with the tank more than one length with the hose together. Desirable, but must be necessary for the all connection to be tight. Hose must be protected from being stopped with the stepped on, run over the kink or tangle with the length of the oxygen fuel gas with the tap to together with the convenience for the preventing tangling. No more than 4 inches of the eye with the 12 inches covered with the tape. The two common type of the grade T. The hose with the of the multi-fuel hose with different fuel gas with the acetylene, propane, natural gas, propylene, and the other gas they can be used but not alternately through the same hose. The grade T hose is manufactured with different diameter flame-resistant layer with a sustaining fire. Track welders are required 3/8 inch and diameter grade T hose. Grade R hose manufactured for the acetylene fuel gases. Grade R hose are greater than T hose will be deteriorated with the inside of the alternate fuel gas pass through. The R grade hose does not have the same flame-resistant layer. Information including the type of the diameter of the chamfer along with the entire length of the hose of the manufacturer of the chamfer. The market will be aware of the overtime, but they may still be visible near where it's attached to the regulator hose reel. Color code for hose are red for combustible gases, green for oxygen. Hose must be with the other gases which are intended. Hose length and diameter is affected the stated pressure of equipment used. Hose connection blow out the new hose with the gas for which the hose will be used. Remove the residual assembling hose connection. Only crimped materials will be used. Torches. Torch handle attachments must be maintained in good condition, carefully handled, and not even the valves must be closed when the torch stays in place. Handle the tracking welders with the Victor HD 310C with equivalent torch handle performing the welding due with the Victor 315C or equivalent will not provide required volume needed for the thermite welding must not be used. And then show the flashback arresters. Equipment approved with the flashback arrester applied with the torch. Flashback arrester is equipment available with the 2-type with the torch mount with a regular mount with ensure the proper flashback with the arrestor is applied with the proper stamp with identified specific arrestor type. Flashback arrest with the distinguished route with the torch preventing fire from the spreading of the back of the torch with the dome of the flashback may cover the dirty tip of the lack of the adequate fuel pressure, gas pressure for the type of the side, tip side of being used. The fuel gas cylinder is nearly empty. Show the flashback of the turn to determine the cover of the correct before with resuming operation. Flashback cover immediately show the action valve, torch handle, and welded and cutting attachment if the cutting. Using inline pressure gauge, the inline pressure gauge is managed to be installed with the action fuel system. Thermite welding gauge will be installed between the torch handle and the flashback arresters. Cutting a welding attachment and the tip of the proper torch head with the design with the fuel gas, settling proper propane, natural gas map, or etc. Settling cutting tips are 1 P with and have flush end. Propane gas tips have 2 P for the design. They have the recessed end. Recessed help with the trap of the propane gas long enough to ignite. Torch precaution when working with the torches. Ensure the gas stream and not directly towards yourself or the others. Keep the flame in the spark directed away from the personal flame. The equipment of the torches should be mounted with the purge with the lighting and to ensure flow of the oxygen fuel gas. Do not use the torch and hammer the scraper with the other of the intended purpose. The equipment is set up when setting up the weld with the cutting. When the equipment is important with the all operation performed systematically. Following the set with the procedures, ensure the safety of the operative with no comply with the instructions. Stay with the fire prevention plan when using oxygen fuel equipment. The cylinder use. When working with the gas cylinder, the plate for the oxygen fuel gas cylinder on level floor, if they are mounted on the truck with the tie them securely to the workbench with the post of the wall with the other secure with the anchor to ensure the cylinders remain upright with the move of the valve, protecting caps and the open flow fuel gas valve with an instant with the lens closed, blow out any dirt of the floor material that accumulated during the shipment of the store with the open the oxygen gas valve with an instant and then close with the do not stand with the facing cylinder valve outlets for the opening cylinder valves. Pressure regulators. Check with the regulator, feed with the dirt, obstruct with the check with the thread with the cylinder regulator with the imperfection, connect the fuel regulator with the fuel gas cylinder with the oxygen regulator with the oxygen cylinder with the appropriate branch with the tight with the connection with the neat with the preventing leakage, and check with the no pressure regulating adjusting screw with the turn counterclockwise. Check with the hose defecting including burns, nicks, and bad fittings. Check connect the red hose with the fuel gas regulator, green hose with the oxygen regulator. Check connecting next tightly with the ensure the leak proof. Note the fuel gas hose connection has left-handed threads and knots to the identification. Open cylinder valves are slow with the red read the high pressure gauge to check with the cylinder gauge for pressure. Connect the red fuel gas hose with the flashback arrestor mount with the torch handle. Connect with the green oxygen hose to the flashback arrestor mount with the torch handle. Leak test. The system must be tested for leaks prior to initial use of each of the chip. The combination torch should be converted with the alternator with the torch equipment is suspected of being damaged when flashbacks occur with the new torch is installed. When checking the system for the leak of the following. When oxygen cylinder valve is open, adjust the oxygen cylinder regulator valve to a 20 psi gauge. The fuel gas cylinder valve will adjust the fuel gas regulator to deliver 10 psi gauge. Ensure the oxygen fuel gas control valve with the torch handle will close the oxygen fuel gas cylinder valve with the adjusting screw with the counterclockwise one turn. Remove the gauge of the both regulator for the two manage for the gauge reading do not chamber the system and leak type. If they are leak with the proof of the leak with the detection soap with the water with the locate blood pressure gauge reading to creep with the leak present with the cylinder valve with inlet connection. Perform the following steps. Type of the inlet connection, releasing the pressure from the regulator. Inlet connection continue the leak with the regulator repaired with a qualified repair technician. Never tighten cylinder valve. Cylinder valve is leaking and remove the regulator with the cylinder and play with the cylinder outdoors. Notify the gas supplier immediately. If the low pressure gauge reduces the creep of the leak in the presence of the regulator outlet connection with the hose add the torch inlet connection with the control valve with the torch hose and will perform the following steps. After the pressure for this, relieve the system time with the regulator outlet connection with the hand or channel with the inlet connection. If the connections continue to leak, have the regulator the torch handle repair with the qualified technician and replace the leaking hose. Take the repair place connection with leaks are found. After testing system, verify that no leaks equipment exists. Equipment may be used with appropriate 24-24-9 record inspection information included with the inspector date with the gain number, the defect of the found, and the employee's technical corrective action if the applicable later review with the welding supervisor. Complete forms is being sent with the track welding manager with the form 24-24-9 with the Union Pacific Weld under the HR Craft training page order online requisition system. 103.14 ignition extinguishing cords only stand friction light with the ignite oil all oxygen fuel gas equipment with the fuel gas equipment ignition torch never point torch other flammable materials light torch must be laid down pass from one person to another. The lighted torch must not be laid down pass from one torch to another kept in your hand when climbing and left unattended. Igniting oxy-settling torch, proper to ignite oxy-settling torch, use the following sequence. The open oxy-settling valve on the torch handle, ignite the gas, adjust the flame, and the black carbon smoke disappears. Introduce oxygen, adjust the neutral flame. Extinguishing oxy-settling torch. To properly shut down the oxy-settling torch, the following sequence. Shut the oxygen valve on the handle. Shut off the oxy-settling valve on the torch handle. Follow the sequence on both sides of the system and check for leaks. If a pop is heard of the oxygen valve is leaking, the small flame is still burning on the tip of the torch. The acetylene valve is leaking. Tightening the leaking valve with a wrench in the qualified repair facility showing that the acetylene valve the first will create a pop every time, resulting in shooting being blocked back in the torch. Uniting an oxypropane torch. Properly ignite an oxypropane torch. The following sequence. Slightly open the propane valve. Open the oxygen valve 1/4 turn slightly more than propane valve. Then ignite the torch. Adjust the neutral flame. Note with the ignition of the torch, the gap between the torch tip of the flame and the too much propane is spread by the extinguished flame and the closed propane valve first. Closing oxygen valve to start over. Extinguishing oxypropane torch. Properly shut down the oxypropane torch. The following sequence. The shut of the propane valve of the torch handle. The shut of the oxygen valve of the torch handle. Tip charts are properly tipped for fuel gas being used to show the oxygen PSI gauge and the fuel gas of the PSI gauge. Drain the system when complete with the oxy fuel system must be drained. Equipment to properly shovel the drain one side of the oxy fuel system at the time when they ensure that all the valves of the torch handle are closed. Cover both sides of the cylinder valves on the cylinder. Open the oxygen valve of the torch handle that goes off the oxygen from the hose and close the valve. Release the pressure for the oxygen regulator. Turn the pressure adjusting screw for the counterclockwise. Open the fuel gas for the torch handle exhaust. Fuel gas from the hose. Close the valve. Release the pressure fuel gas regulator. Turn the pressure adjusting screw counterclockwise. 104 equipment.